Thank you. Welcome to the City Council meeting of September 5th, 2024. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:31 p.m. Roll call, please.
Madam Mayor, we have no requests under roll call item A. So I'll proceed with the roll call. Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Lentz.
Here.
Councilmember Mackin.
Here.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Here. Can we get a report out from the city attorney for the closed session, please?
Do you want to do Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge
Excuse
of Allegiance?
Oh, jeez. I completely forgot. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will move on with the report out on closed session, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the council met in closed session and took up.
We can't hear you, Tom. You're muffled.
Is this better?
No, not really.
Is this better? I just switched.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need to turn the volume up on our side, on our end? Hold on.
Hold on, Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Can you hear?
Yeah, better.
A little better.
Council met in closed session and took up two liability claims, or item D and E on the closed session agenda. Council directed to reject those claims, and the claimants will be notified appropriately.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear that at all.
I'll just paraphrase, and we met in closed session and both claims were rejected.
Well, one claim.
Or no, one claim was rejected and one claim was accepted, and the parties will be notified.
There you go.
Okay, so now we'll move on to adopting the agenda. Can I get a first and a second to adopt the agenda as it stands?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We'll move on to oral communications number 1. This is where members of the public wishing to speak on an item not on our agenda.
Test 1, 2, 3 test.
Oh, that's
Better.
good.
Thank you, Tom. Not on the agenda can speak, and my first slip is from David Schooley.
Mayor, council members, folks. My name is David Schooley. You've said it already, so fine. For me, there's an extreme concern of the acres of Brisbane or the acres of San Bruno Mountain. I wait for the council members' understanding of what happens for all of us. And just a quiet thought about it is that last year, just wandering around, I found some of the lower acres with the canyon sections with the pipe vine butterfly far more than I knew far before. Just poking on some steep areas that in those areas are still a real secret special place for a butterfly. Not necessarily, I mean, the mission blue is there in some areas, but that's so special to see the pipe vine plant right there, butterfly. But that's not the rain here right now. I have another, not too fast, not too quick statement right now. It's the acres, another set of acres that's above the the Bank of America. The area is right there, the Old Bay Shore and the entrance into Brisbane. It's an oak grove that we planted in 1986. And those oaks have grown all through that area. I don't know how many people have noticed that place. But it's like an entrance into Brisbane now. And it's a sense of feeling into coming into the canyons of this mountain. And now, like it has something we have to start thinking about what's going to happen right in that area. Unfortunately, there's some junky things here and there and sort of not a real present thing, but the real truth of that entrance is the oaks standing taller and stronger than you can imagine right now to see. So I hope that the council members and others, anyone else would go take a look for what that area is. It's a border right there and the entrance into Brisbane. My hope is that the city and other people involved can start clearing some of those areas, pruning some of the areas, maybe perhaps planting other native plants right along the area, right as you enter into Brisbane. And maybe a bench for people sitting there as you come in right by the bay, from the bay into our town. Work for a healthy mountain is something very special for this town. And it's like a small thing, but I've really felt at this point that the council members and people around in town think about that entrance, whatever was going to happen. Because I know major powers are coming on every level of the Bay Area now, and villages and freeways and everything around us are massively changing fast. And I just hope that the council members will remember carefully a special town that has survived right there among the wilderness and the rare species of the mountain.
Thank you,
Thanks.
David.
I could give a letter to everybody if that's okay.
If you give it to the clerk, she'll make sure we get them.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next slip is from Michael Barnes.
Good evening. My name is Michael Barnes. I'm a Brisbane resident. I have 5 items to address. First, congratulations on the agreement with California High-Speed Rail. I hope this accelerates the remediation of the long polluted baylands and leads to productive use of those brownfields in the near future. Second, in September of 2023, the city responded to the grand jury regarding bicycle safety. In response to the grand jury recommendation number 1, the city wrote that by December 2023, the city will create a bicycle safety resource tab on the Brisbane Police Department website, where we will regularly post all reported bicycle accident data. As of noon today, I have not yet seen such information on the city website. It's been a year. Please add this promised information to your website. Third, in response to grand jury recommendation 3, the city wrote, the city currently has several methods of incident reporting to the police department, which includes a website submission site, an anonymous tip line, and a non-emergency telephone number to our communications center. By June 3rd, 2024, we will look to include these reporting methods on a bicycle safety resource and reporting page on the Brisbane Police Department website. Again, as of noon today, I've yet to see this feature set on your website. Please add this promised feature to your website. Fourth, your ad hoc best practices subcommittee should be tasked with studying public art best practices. Brisbane is the only jurisdiction in San Mateo County with a standing art committee that includes elected officials as members who vote on the selection of public artists and art. This is a worst practice known nationally since 1989's attack on the NEA by Senator Jesse Helms and other elected officials. More recently, elected San Francisco Supervisor Catherine Stefani corrupted the public art process and selection of Lava Thomas to produce a sculpture honoring Maya Angelou. Supervisor Stefani apologized a year later in 2020, and the sculpture is set to debut this month. Fifth, the city still does not have a public art master plan. The people have responded to your art master plan survey and expect their voices to be heard. Not having a public art master plan and not following the public art process has already led to bad public art decisions. This reminds me of Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential nomination acceptance speech, where she related that her mother taught her, never do anything half-assed. Please complete the public art master plan before acquiring any more public art or issuing RFPs for public art. Don't rush forward on an unrealistic acquisition timeline without a master plan, as that is a half-assed job of acquiring public art. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public in the audience that would like to speak on an item not on our agenda? Michelle Salmon.
I just want to thank the Brisbane City Council for working so hard and so diligently over the last 2 years to come to some resolutions and with the high-speed rail. I know that we're still going to have it, but your work is greatly appreciated in mitigating the scope of it, the intensity of it, and I just really want to express my appreciation for your patience and diligence on that. I know it's been a long haul. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members that would like to speak in oral communications? One.
Is that mine?
Yes.
Can you
I
read
just
my
was trying
writing?
To
Says
find out
later.
if it was under this or under an
Oh, okay.
unmentioned item.
Oh, okay, very good. I thought my writing was bad. And
Is
it
this, is this on an item that's not on the agenda?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, two quick things. I just heard there's something going on in the quarry and I'm interested in learning about, not the quarry, the acres, and I'm interested in learning about what's going on there. And the other thing, I gave a leaflet to Ingrid over there about a new group formed to help work against the development plans in the quarry. And I just, you'll get a copy of the leaflet. And I just want to let you know that. It's a new group. It's called Mountain Butterfly Collective. So I just want to let you know that. And we'll be talking. I'll be working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members in the audience that would like to speak on item not on the agenda? And do we have anyone online that would like to speak?
I see no hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we will move on to the consent calendar. And I know that, can I get an approval to approve consent items B through, actually, I need to remove, oh no, B through M.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And then there are items that, item N, which is to approve the Excelsior Running Club 6th Annual Star City San Bruno Mountain Half Marathon. And that Councilmember Lentz will need to leave the meeting room and recuse himself
Sounds good.
for the contents consent calendar vote.
Madam Mayor, you should know,
I should note why, is that what you said?
just 2 words, that's all. He's a member of the club.
He's a member of the club, yes. Is there any discussion of that item or can I get an approval?
I'll make a motion to approve item N.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Can you let Councilmember Lentz know that he can come back in? And I'm gonna pass the next item to the Vice Mayor because I am a member of the next club, and I will leave the room.
I'm a member too, but Terry's on the board.
Yes,
So do I need to leave also?
no, she's in a control position. You do not need to leave.
Okay.
Okay, so item O is to approve the Sierra Point Yacht Club's 2024 regatta as a co-sponsored event. Are there any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is going to move us on to awards and presentations. And first, we will go to the swearing in of newly appointed committee members. The city clerk will now swear in the newly appointed committee members and city representatives. And congratulations are going to Anthony Walker of the Open Space and Ecology Committee, his term through 2026. Michael Goldman, San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District Board of Trustees, term through 2028. Paul Buscal, Complete Streets and Safety Committee, term through 2028. Emily Weirwick, Complete Streets and Safety Committee, term through 2028. Lila Khalili, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee through term 2026. And Carol Zoltwisky, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee through 2026. Keita Highsmith, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee term through 2026 will be appointed but cannot be with us tonight. Madam Clerk.
If I can have all the appointees up here, please. I will now administer the oath or affirmation of allegiance for public officers and employees. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
And I want to say thank you so much for your upcoming service and dedication to the city of Brisbane. And we look forward to a lot of healthy interactions. So thank you. Moving on to proclamations. The city of Brisbane is designation of September 2024 as National Preparedness Month. Whereas during September, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the National Preparedness Month Coalition urge all Americans to take some simple steps to make their families better prepared for emergencies. Whereas this year's theme is Start a Conversation, and all Americans are encouraged to talk with others about steps they can take to prepare. And whereas the loss of life and property can be greatly reduced if appropriate preparedness measures are taken before, during, and after a disaster. And whereas these life-saving procedures will be highlighted during the month of September as the North County Fire Authority, City Emergency Services, and other service organization provide disaster preparedness information to Brisbane residents. Whereas the community should take steps to help them before a disaster strikes, including making a kit, having a plan, being informed, and getting involved. And now therefore, I, Terry O'Connell, Mayor of the City of Brisbane, do hereby proclaim September 2024 as National Preparedness Month, encourage all Brisbane residents to increase their knowledge and awareness of proper safety measures to follow before, during, and after a disaster. And with this, we have our North County Fire Department here to accept the award.
Yeah, thank you. It's,
You want to turn for a photo? No photo takers. Does everybody want to stand up for this one?
Is it all photo? Okay.
Well, we might as well have all of us.
Stand.
Stand. Thank you. Thank you. And if you'd like to say a few words, please.
yes, Joel Abelson, Deputy Fire Chief, North County Fire Authority. Madam Mayor and Council, thank you so much for the proclamation. I would just, one thing, point the public and everyone to northcountyfire.gov or through the Brisbane website, and you can see abundance of material on safety and preparation. You also, if you subscribe to our social media channels, we've got a lot of good information every day. We put out stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to continue a public hearing considering introducing an ordinance approving a zoning text and map amendment 2024 RZ1 overlay to the R1 residential district and the RBA Brisbane Acres residential district in its entirety. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. This matter has been continued a couple times. You did get an exhaustive staff report in June. I don't think we want to repeat that this evening. I know there are a lot of questions, or maybe we can move straight to that. Just a reminder that there's basically two situations without the ordinance. SB 9, the state law that I think there's a lot of questions about, a lot of concerns about, applies in Brisbane in any event, whether or not the ordinance is adopted. So the intent of the ordinance was to add some objective development standards related to parking, related to reduced building height within setbacks, providing neighbor notification of these projects, and to promote the preservation of on-street parking. So those are the objective standards that are proposed in the ordinance as a companion to what SB 9 already requires. So with that, I'd entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start with council member questions. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I'll just preface this by saying that I know the answers to a lot of these questions, and many of them are found in the staff report, but based on information that I have received from the public, I think it's really beneficial to go over these in this meeting, especially for those who haven't had the opportunity to look at the packet. So hoping this can clear up maybe a little misinformation that's out there. So from correspondences I've received, many residents believe there is a 240 unit proposed development in the acres. Is that true?
No.
From correspondences I have received, some believe that BDI is set to build in the acres. Are you aware of any such intent from them or any other developer?
No, I'm not.
The city owns several parcels in the acres designated for open space and habitat conservation. Can you elaborate on the city's declaration of restrictions on those properties, and what would it require if a future council wanted to see those developed?
I would defer to the city attorney to answer that question.
Mind reading it, Madam Councilmember?
Did you say you want me to repeat?
Yes.
Okay. The city owns several parcels in the acres designated for open space and habitat conservation. Can you elaborate on the city's declaration of restrictions on those properties and what it would require if a future council wanted to see those be developed?
Thank you. Madam, John, this is all zoned residential, even though there are the restricted properties.
Yes.
So the city could honor the restrictions. There's a very good chance a housing activist group will come challenge it just because they're challenging any sort of any actions that cut back into the application of SB 9. But my argument would be that this was 9. It's for a purposeful, a longstanding use that is within the police powers of the city. So we would defend it on that ground. As far as the future council, if hopefully it never happens, but if a court agreed with my reasoning, then a future council could not undo it. Even if a court said, no, you're wrong, this is subject to SB 9, a future council couldn't undo it unless the legislature undid SB 9.
But what if like we're taking SB 9 out of it? Like not considering SB 9? If another council wanted to say, we want to build on those properties that the city has for open space, would that require a unanimous vote
No,
of the council?
it's a restriction that runs with the land. A council could vote to undo it unless it's in a special trust. My understanding has been that the city didn't do that long ago when they put these together. But technically, yes, the council could undo it unless they're protected beyond just a council action, which my understanding is it's a council action.
Okay.
Through the chair, that would take a unanimous vote to do that.
Oh, thank you, John.
Okay. So to clarify, if a future council decided, oh, all these parcels that the city has that are meant for open space, they're meant for habitat conservation, we actually want to put housing there, the entire city council would have to vote yes to do that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I interject on that? Can I interject on that, please? Some of those this is for staff, some of those purchases were made with restricted funds. Would those funds need to be refunded to the people who made those funding acquisitions?
Presumably, if they were limited for that purpose, yes.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Does SB 9 apply to parcels with a conservation easement?
They would not. It would not.
Does SB 9 apply where there is an endangered species habitat exists?
No.
Does SB 9 apply where there is no existing infrastructure or utilities?
No.
If the city left our zoning untouched, could a property owner still invoke SB 9?
Yes.
A member of the public sent a letter encouraging the city to implement front setbacks. Is that something we can do? And if so, how many feet is reasonable?
The front yard setbacks in those, right now, SB 9 subdivisions would have to meet the front yard setback within the zone. So the R1 zone is 15 feet setback, front
10
setback,
15 feet with some exceptions.
and 10 feet in the RBA zone. Could the city adopt a higher setback? You could. There's still provisions in the bill that you have to allow an 800 square foot unit,
Yeah.
irrespective of whatever your development standards are. And there's also the unintended consequence of the greater the setback with hillside lots in Brisbane, you may end up requiring more grading by pushing properties away from the street.
Thank you. In the staff report, it reads, development under SB 9 allows for property owners to either add an additional unit on their lot or subdivide their lot into 2 lots subject to certain restrictions. Can you explain what those restrictions are?
There are 2 categories, just eligibility by location, but also anti-displacement eligibility. So, and those are outlined in the ordinance or detailed in the ordinance, a lot of record. It has to do with not displacing tenants, habitat for endangered species, and so on. A number, it's a long list.
Thank you. 2 more questions. SB 9 allows that a public agency may deny a project that would have specific adverse impacts on public health and safety that cannot be mitigated. Can you provide examples of some adverse effects besides the lot containing endangered species habitat that might not be able to be mitigated?
Well, again, the zone provisions for public streets and utilities are intended to promote safety. Those apply uniformly in the zoning district. You'd have to find a very unique circumstance that would apply only to a single parcel to apply that particular provision. It's kind of hard to visualize that you'd find a condition on one lot in the acres, aside from maybe habitat issues, that would trigger that threshold and being able to deny it based on unique health and safety situation.
Okay. And one last question. I heard the point made that if SB 9 is overturned, and this came from a public comment via email, that if SB 9 is overturned, we don't want to be on record as having supported this level of what some might call overdevelopment. So how easy is it to repeal or modify this zoning amendment should alterations of SB 9 come forward in the future?
The city would just have to repeal the overlay district in its entirety. That could likely be done on an emergency basis, effective immediately upon council action, subject to findings being made that we would have to work with the city attorney on, but I suspect that could be done.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
To follow up on that, if someone had proposed a development under the current zoning overlay, and then we were to repeal the overlay, that would still apply to a project that was underway. Is that correct?
It would depend on the state law ultimately, and when the date of the repeal was effective, because that's really driving this, right? Not the city's
Correct.
ordinance. So
Correct.
that would be dependent on that.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next with their questions? Cliff?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Great questions, Madison. Thank you. So, I just want to piggyback on the last question in regards to, being able to repeal. Could the council in the ordinance have a trigger appeal that just automatically happens? We wouldn't have to do an emergency meeting. We could just have it baked into the ordinance itself.
My discussions with legal counsel indicated we could not do that.
Okay. All right. There's been some talk about general law cities, charter cities. Most cities like Brisbane are general law. So how does SB 9 impact a charter city?
It affects charter cities the same way.
Same
I
way.
know there's a litigation in Southern California that was limited to a number of discrete charter cities, but that lawsuit only relates to them and affects them.
Got it. Okay. And then I think we have 4 to 5 applications that have been before the planning department, but none of them have been acted on. Is that correct?
My recollection is that 3 of them actually have been acted on. One of them has expired, but they could reapply, but none of them have actually applied for a building permit. So the first action was to split the lot, and that has been done on 3, but only 2 of the 3 actually are still available to do that.
All right. And then those applications have been in the R1, not in the Brisbane Acres?
Correct.
All right. And, you've mentioned, in the staff report and through the communication that has gone out to the public, some of the obstacles of building in the Brisbane Acres. And this is just trying to get your opinion. I mean, there's, again, a lot of obstacles to build there before SB9. Do you see SB9 being like a motivator, something that would make it easier for development to occur in the acres?
Well, it's been in effect for 2 years and no permits have been applied for in the acres. Obviously, the market can change, things can change in the future, but that's our experience to date.
One of the things that the planning department put forth to the planning commission and part of their recommendation to us in the ordinance, has to deal with reducing height limits of buildings in the setbacks. Can you just kind of explain, like, if we pass the ordinance, what that means for these heights in these setbacks to the neighbors that are around these properties? And if we didn't pass it, what could potentially happen under SB9?
The state ordinance, or SB9, provides a 4-foot rear yard setback. In Brisbane, the setback is typically 10 feet or more in a rear yard. So under the state law, you could build a standard size structure, 2-story, whatever the maximum building height is, to the 4-foot limit. The proposed ordinance, the provision would be that whatever area of building is between the state setback and the city's standard setback would be reduced to a maximum 25 feet in height as opposed to 30 or 35. So you get a lower building height adjacent to an directly impacted neighbor's property.
Okay, so if I'm a neighbor to someone who has applied for an SB9 application, having this ordinance really is a benefit to me in regards to having either a 25 height structure or potentially a 30 or 35 foot high structure.
Correct.
Do I have that correct? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. So another part of the ordinance is, requires a minimum of 1 non-garage parking space on the property. And that's how I view it, as a non-garage parking space for, per primary unit. So can you give us the same kind of scenario between passing the ordinance with these provisions or not doing it in regards to SB9, and what kind of impacts that would have on the community?
Well, the commission, when they added that provision, recommended that provision, state law requires 1 space. It doesn't specify covered or uncovered. So, if you build a garage, a single car garage, the commission's concern was that often the garage space is devoted to personal storage, not vehicular storage. So the idea is, by having an open space off the street, it'll be more likely to be used for car parking as opposed to being cluttered with personal storage. So it'd actually be more effective of getting cars off the street and providing room on properties for parking their cars.
Okay, all right. So that doesn't add an additional non-garage space, but it's just stating that we think that it's preferred to have a non-garage parking spot as opposed to an in-garage parking spot, because we all know that a lot of the garages are filled with stuff. They're workshops, variety of things. So that was very clever and smart on the planning commission for recommending that. You know, there was a map that went out, I think in the recent blast, and if staff could put that up, please. All right, so this map is really helpful for me because I like this to visually see things, so it gives me an understanding of the lay of the land. And I'm really glad that this updated map shows the city-owned parcels that are shaded. And so obviously we purchased these properties to protect endangered species land, right? Protect it as open space. And as was brought up before, it'd be extremely difficult to develop those parcels. But there's also a lot of acres that are within this priority preservation area. So, John, these lots were placed in this area to protect endangered species, correct?
They were identified as the most likely to be having habitat and should be prioritized for acquisition.
Okay, great. So if that's the case, then, and I know it was mentioned before that properties that contain endangered species habitat are ineligible for SBC or SB9 development. Is that correct? So,
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, chances are all the lots that are, let's see, I guess west of that priority preservation line, those lots most likely would not be able to use SB9 because of that requirement, correct? Okay. All right. And then the last question in regards to public infrastructure. So I know that it was mentioned before that properties that do not have public infrastructure are ineligible for SB9 development. So if you own a property that does not have public infrastructure, but of course you plan to do it, just because you don't have the infrastructure already, that then you cannot apply for an SB9 development application?
Correct.
Okay, so it already has to exist. And so, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. Do you think that probably the reason why the R1 lots are the ones that are most active or the only active ones for SB9 because the public infrastructure already exists?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. Would you like to go next? Oh, okay, Colleen, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, colleagues. Some really great questions. And some of your questions I was going to ask, so I'm going to have to kind of wade through my marked sections here, if you'll bear with me. One of the first things that seems to come up over and over from a lot of residents that reached out to me is about habitat. And I think we're going to need a little further clarification about habitat because in reading in the staff report, it says that a number of the properties up on the acres are likely to contain habitat. And so I'd like to have an idea, what is the criteria for designation of habitat for endangered butterflies and who determines whether an area qualifies?
San Mateo County maintains a list of biologists who are qualified to ascertain the butterfly biologists, habitat biologists. They're on retainer with the city. So if somebody wants to develop a property in the acres, they pay the city. The city pays one of these biologists to go out and do the appropriate level of survey to determine whether or not it contains habitat or not. That results of that study then get routed to the county and the city. And depending on the results of that, they can obtain an operating program under the HCP to proceed, or they can't, depending on what the results of the survey may be.
So is that done all at once, or is that on a case-by-case basis as someone applies for SB 9?
It'd be case by case, and it would apply to anybody in the acres, SB 9 or conventional
Okay,
development.
so when we talk about the San Bruno Mountain habitat plan area, it doesn't mean that every parcel within that area qualifies for endangered species habitat.
Not every parcel within the HCP area has habitat. Correct.
Okay, so some may not and
Correct.
could be developed because they
Correct.
won't have that exemption.
Correct.
Okay. And then also, another very common question is fire hazard severity zone. Who determines this? And could you give us an example of an area in Brisbane that at this time is a fire hazard severity zone?
The staff checked with the North County Fire Authority before coming to City Council with this, and the area in the acres above that is not to the severity level that is named in the state Senate bill. It's a high severity, as I recall, but not the extremely high as stated in the state.
So in the RBA area, or am I reading this correctly? Nothing would be considered a high severity fire zone.
At this time, correct, but that could change.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I add some context to that too? Part of the
Sure.
question, the CAL FIRE does this, and there's 2 maps that they typically produce on a, I'd like to call it a regular basis, but it's less than regular basis. The map that would, there's a state responsibility area map. So those are areas that are not under the purview of a city. And there's a local responsibility area map. Those are in the process of being updated. The SRA map was, I think, about a year ago. The LRA map has not been updated. But CAL FIRE takes that responsibility. And they typically communicate with the cities when draft maps are out about whether they got that correct. So they do some local communications to determine that.
Okay, so who is the final arbiter then? Is it the state? Is that the driving force that determines the criteria if it applies? Is that correct? Okay.
Can I follow up on that
Sure,
for just a moment?
please.
But that's not the map that a proposed insurer would need to follow by saying, oh, we don't want to insure that because it's in a high fire danger. That's not something that an insurance company needs to follow, is the state maps, because they're a private entity. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just another clarifying point. When we talk about ADUs, and there used to be a requirement that the owner reside in at least one of the units on the property, be it the primary dwelling or the ADU. Is that still in effect? Because I've noted here the new provision in SB 9, let's see here, it has to be the person's personal residence for a minimum of 3 years.
The ordinance would not change the ADU provisions, so those would still be in effect.
Okay. And anything built on that property, if there's multiple units, we all know about short-term rentals. They would be excluded under SB 9 from being listed as short-term rentals in perpetuity.
Correct.
Yes.
But they could be short-term rentals if you use the qualification of 30 to 90 days, which is outside of our Brisbane permitting as short-term rentals.
That would just be a straight rental, but not a short-term
Okay.
rental. Yes.
Moving along. There's a new height limit proposed in 2024 RZ2 of 36 feet. Could you give us an idea how you arrived at 36 feet? That apparently was part of the presentation Ken, that you gave to the Planning Commission?
Correct. That 36 limit came out of the housing element. It was essentially the last stage of the housing element when it went to HCD. And HCD had suggested that essentially the multifamily districts or mixed use with multifamily allow for 36 feet because that was what they saw as reasonable for a 3-story development. When this went to the Planning Commission, the commission was concerned about the border properties, especially between the multifamily, mixed use, and the single family, and wanted to extend that as well to the single family. So the single family was not in the housing element, but that was suggested by the Planning Commission.
Okay. And thinking about 36-foot limits, for any home in Brisbane that has existing solar, where any unit built adjacent might then block out their solar, how would you handle that?
There is not a provision for shading of structures or private views, those kinds of things in Brisbane.
Okay. Some questions have come up with regard to infrastructure. And typically we think of if someone wants to develop up there, there needs to be water, sewer lines, electrical, storm drains with that. Am I missing anything else? Road, sorry. Yeah, I guess you have to have that. Further questions, though, came about in that there's been historic reports and witnessed in recent decades some geological instability up there. So in addition to the common infrastructure, could in fact retaining walls be required and/or geotechnical or hydrology studies be required before passing approval on permits?
That would be a common requirement.
Okay. And if in fact anyone developing had to put in retaining walls, does the city then assume responsibility for maintaining those if they fail? I'm asking because the way it was also brought up to me is we've learned those are really expensive commodities, retaining walls.
If it's going to be a city facility, a city road, the city would typically assume the responsibility for maintenance. Would the city exclude the wall from the actual dedication and leave that within an easement or private property? You know, I don't want to speak for the city engineer, what he might require in that kind of situation.
Okay. I also heard some people reading through the information that's been put on the website about parking. And one comment made to me was someone can put in 4 units on a split lot or a single lot, and there would be no parking because of the half-mile distance from a transit stop or a high-quality transit corridor. Later in our staff report, I see that that does not apply in Brisbane. And I'd like to make note that one of the criteria on that is you have to have, at least by Samtrans, service intervals of 15 minutes. And the closest we come to that is 18 minutes during commute hours. So could you please verify the no parking does not apply to Brisbane?
The only high-quality transit stop is the train station, so it would apply within the Baylands area of Brisbane.
Okay. And let me.
Can I follow up with that? Right now, service at the Caltrain stop is once an hour. How would that qualify for within 18 minutes?
They label any fixed transit like a station as high quality by state definition.
Okay, thank you.
And let's see. I noted with interest the Planning Commission had recommended neighbor notification process. And could you please clarify at what point would that notification come about? Would it be when someone says, I'd like to investigate utilizing SB 9 to develop a lot? Or is it at the point permits are issued? Because my concern and what has come back to me about this is that many residents who have a history in Brisbane know about geological instability, and they feel that it's really important to get that information to a potential developer.
It would be, no, not everything is a urban lot split, so sometimes the lot stays the same. So it would be upon issuance of a building permit for a 2-unit development or a building permit following an urban lot split.
So it would be upon issuance of the building permit, so the developer could start work before the neighbors know about it?
Yes, the way this is structured.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that that maybe be moved up sooner. It's a little tough if you find out and the trucks are rolling up. I've
Understand.
had that in my neighborhood. The trucks roll up and I find out there's a project going on that I knew nothing about. Madam Mayor, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and then I want to make a few clarifying statements so people know a timeline of some of the things that have happened here. So one of my questions regarding SB 9 and the question of blocking solar panels, we're all working super hard to electrify our cities. And with SB 9, without our input, it would stand that there could be 4 units on one block with a higher height limit than we would be proposing. And there is no protection for the next door neighbors who might have solar. So that, to me, brings a very significant point in this argument. The other question I have is, John, haven't we purchased every property within the priority preservation area that has become available to us in the last 10, 15 years?
And that's my understanding. Anything that's been available and someone's been willing to sell for the price the city can offer, yes.
And haven't we approached all of these other property owners at some point in the last few years?
We do that annually.
Annually, there you go. So every year, we are asking all of the property owners who have not sold yet, that are in the priority preservation area, if they're willing to sell. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so this goes back quite some time. I'm going to roll us back to 2021. You asked me, I think Cliff asked me to be on the CCAG board about 6.5 years ago. And about 3 years ago, the CCAG board appoint a group of people within the CCAG board to sit on the legislative committee. And we have the dubious honor of looking at all of these bills that come out of the state. It is very boring. It is very laborious. And we have vetoed and opposed so many of these bills. I'll go back to September 2021. We had a unanimous oppose on SB 9 from the Legislative Committee. We then sent it to the full board of CCAG. There was a unanimous oppose at the entire CCAG board. For those of you who don't know really what CCAG does, it is the City and County of Associated Governments of San Mateo County, and it also includes a seat on that board from the county itself. So we had a unanimous opposition to this bill as far back as 2021. We are only one county in 58 in the state of California. We lost. This bill went through. So we have vetoed and opposed this bill since 2021, but it became law in January of 2022. And as you've heard tonight, we've had 5 applications and no development under SB 9 as it stands. the SB 9 rules are sort of pretty loose, and this whole overlay was supposed to help us reduce the impact of SB 9. That is the reason that we've been trying to noodle through this to see what is going to work. Not only have we opposed SB 9, but SB 450 snuck through last Thursday. Please remember these numbers and go look them up as to what they mean. SB 450 snuck in last Thursday. It is sitting on the governor's desk right now for approval. And what that bill will do will close all of the loopholes that are currently sitting in SB 9. So when someone says, why don't we just put an overlay ordinance in there that says, let's have 40-foot setbacks, let's have 15-foot height limits, SB 450 would stop all of that. In addition to that, Senator Wiener and SB 1037 says $50,000 violation per month to cities that don't obey. These are state bills. These are Senate bills put together, and SB 9 was approved by our Senator, Josh Becker. So if you voted for Josh, my comment here tonight is that you should be calling his office and writing to his office with all of your disapproval of the things that have been done at the Senate level. We can't overturn SB 9. There is not a chance we can. We tried. I'm on your CCAG board. I have represented you for a long time, and I'm not happy about any of this. But you have to be the ones that rattle the cages of the senators' offices and make them do something about this. I spoke with our supervisor, David Canepa, earlier this week, and basically our conversation went like this. The pendulum has swung all the way over here, and they're now starting to realize, uh-oh, if we don't do something about this, we're not going to get reelected. That is true. So the pressure should be on from us to the Senate people to do the job. We vetoed SB 450. We have vetoed another new one, 3093. Look that up. SB 450, we are vetoing that as of yesterday. It'll be before the CCAG board next week. And there's quite a few others. So these Senate bills are getting rushed through, and you have to be the ones who stand up and say no, because we've already said no. So that is what I wanted to say. I wanted to make sure everybody got that message that you have to be the ones that speak to the senators. Thank you for listening to me.
May I add one comment to what you said, please? I recently read a little survey done nationwide about what gets legislators' ear. You can write emails, you can write letters, and they go, oh yeah, another letter came in. Oh yeah, another email. But it's been proven when you call them and that phone rings all day and you have to talk directly to a person, and they recommend speak very respectfully and nicely, try to reach a rapport with them, they listen. And then they start going, oh, we got a problem, or we need to start listening to people. Because I know it's way easier, myself included, to write a letter or an email and you're done with it in seconds. But the phone call's always harder, and the inertia, you're going to have to, it's busy, you're going to have to call back. You get voicemail, you got to call back again. But call them, please, please, please.
And I have one more thing to add to that. The conversation relative to the charter cities versus general law cities and these bills. In June, I think it was June 15th, or excuse me, maybe July 15th, the Attorney General Bonta was set to put an end to what's going on with the charter cities too. So they're pushing us as hard as they can. It's time for us to push them back.
May I mention one other thing?
Sure, we
And I'll
haven't gone
stop
to discussion,
interrupting you.
but sure.
Okay. The other question that always comes up is, how did these bills get through? How did that happen? I never heard about it. I'm hearing about it after the fact. A lot of these, they know that with publicity, they're hard to get through. They go in and at the 11th hour, and they know how to get that done. So what do? They're the law. How do you get these overturned? And the more recent laws, you mentioned SB 450, It passed with great majorities, which tells you something. The people you're electing to represent you in Sacramento are not necessarily listening to what you want. And so what do you do about it once it's the law? So today I had a conversation and hearkened back to a couple years ago, and there was a referendum. We are a referendum state. There was a referendum going around the state to repeal some of these housing laws, and they pulled it. And I don't know why they pulled it. As I recall, it was because it was too close to the deadline to get something on the ballot, and they were afraid they didn't have time to get all the signatures they need. If you want to know what you can do to overturn some bills, talk to everybody you know in the state of California about the referendum process. Thank you.
So I really don't have any questions for staff on this item. I think everything has been explained to me and the question asked by my colleagues have been very good. I'd like to open it up for the public. And so I'd like to do that. If you haven't filled out a slip, please do so that we can hear from you. Please try to be concise in your comments. We've got a lot of people here with opinions. And so if we can be concise, we can get through this a little quicker and move forward and get on with our evening. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the public hearing. And the first slip I have, these are in no particular order. They will be from now on. And again, I ask you to be as brief as you possibly can. And the first one is from Sean Sweeney.
Good evening, council members, members of Brisbane. My understanding is Brisbane has adopted the state's requirements for road widths and parking structures on roads with the state. They've adopted the state of California's roads widths. And I'd like to point out that Kings Road, where Margaret Road comes off it. Margaret Road is an access to the acres. Kings Road at that point is 14 feet wide. The state requirement for road width is 20 feet wide with no parking on either side. 30 feet wide with parking along one side, 40 feet wide with parking along two sides. At that same junction, the width of Margaret is 14 feet wide. So we're 6 feet wide in deficit on the widths of those two roadways. On Margaret, there is parking on one side with that 14-foot wide width throat. At no point along the entire expanse of Margaret is the road wider than 17.5 feet wide, and there's parking along one side of Margaret. Margaret, according to the state fire, I'm not sure what his exact title is. I asked him, I was trying to figure out who owns Margaret. Margaret Avenue is, the city always points out that Margaret is a private road, so the city is not responsible for the maintenance of Margaret. No one owns Margaret. According to the tax records, Margaret is not owned currently. Beatrice is owned. I'm not sure about the status of Paul, but Paul is even narrower than Margaret. And if the Oakland Hills fire rings a bell with anybody in this room, deaths occurred as a result of that fire, mainly because people could not get out. And if we're talking about, I'm wondering, are we getting rid of the Brisbane Acres Ordinance? Currently, the Brisbane Acres Ordinance states that if you want to develop a portion, if you want to improve your house by more than 100 square feet, you have to widen the road from the throat of your driveway to the first dedicated city street, which is King's, which currently doesn't even meet the state requirements for width. So those are issues that I don't know if they're even being talked about or they should be.
Can we follow up with staff? Can I ask staff?
Would you like to follow up with staff after each question so that we keep them straight? Or do we want to
Yes.
have staff keep a list of the questions so they can address them? Which would be better for staff?
Whatever the council wants, we can do it either way.
Do you want to follow up on each statement? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead with that then.
The current requirements are not being changed or eliminated or changed in any manner. The requirements for roadways remain. They will remain after the ordinance is adopted, if it is adopted. So there's no change to those requirements. They're not being eliminated.
So a prospective development on any of those unimproved roads would need to bring that roadway up to standard to the nearest junction.
Correct. Yes.
And would it require bringing the road further below them to standard or
Yeah,
not?
if need be, yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's more follow-up, I think, from
Okay.
what was asked. Are we aware of who owns Margaret?
We would have to look into it. I don't recall offhand.
Okay, maybe staff can get back to us on that. And for adoption of state standards for roadways, you know, obviously Brisbane was built a little ramshackle, right? So I would assume that certain roads would be grandfathered in, and if we're adopting state standards for road widths, those would be on new streets that would be developed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, second slip is from Peter Sutherland.
Honorable council members, Madam Mayor, I'd like to follow up on that train of thought. I'm deeply concerned about all these cars and all these new residents who would come down from Beatrice, filtering onto Kings, also onto Glen Park, and also onto Humboldt, and maybe onto San Mateo, when I'm pretty sure that most of those roads have sections where you can't even have two cars passing, not to mention a fire engine going up the hill and maybe an SUV coming down the hill.
Peter, what street are you talking about?
What's that?
What street?
Well, I'm talking about Kings, Humboldt, Glen Park, San Mateo.
So just in general?
Yeah, just in general. So I want to refer back to that statement or that exception in SB 9, which says if a local agency makes a written finding that a project would create a specific adverse impact upon public health and safety or the environment without a feasible way to mitigate such impact, the agency may deny the housing project. And my point is that this doesn't impact just one lot up on the lower acres. This would impact all the lots that would all have cars filtering down the mountain. Whoops, what was that? Okay, so, and I also want to remind people about the fire and how everybody got caught up on the hill that occurred in 2018. And people couldn't leave the area, go up or down the area. So I think this width thing that was mentioned before is extremely important for the safety of residents that are currently on the hill. And also future residents that would be occupying Beatrice, as far as fire engines going up, police going up, and then residents trying to get off the hill, because that created a major congestion point in the 2018 fire.
You talking 2008?
2018, the fire that was the grass fire that was up above on the top of the hill. Was there a name for that?
It was the one that happened underneath the power lines
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, it just became a choke point for all vehicles. And I think that's a very important safety consideration. And I also want to bring up as another safety consideration, the quality of soil up on the acres. I think based on what I've observed on Kings and also the history, just recent history, a couple of years ago, when at the top of Glen Park, the whole property was basically flooded with mud, had a mudslide, and then also historical mudslides on Kings and Humboldt. I don't know, and I'd like to ask you, who is responsible for testing the soil, for soils engineering reports, and all that, and what kind of impact building up there would have on building on a poor soil area, and of course, homeowners insurance doesn't cover that. So if there are mudslides and houses slide down the hill and into the road and all that, and people can't get in and out, I think that's also a very important safety consideration. Yeah. And I think that's just about it. So if you take all the lots that are privately owned up in the lower acres, I figure there's going to be about a potential of 24 to 28 units. And if you figure that each of those would probably create like 5 or more cars, you have a potential of getting 100 cars up there. And we know a bunch of them would be SUVs and stuff like that. So that would be a major consideration, all those cars coming down the hill. And it would also be a major consideration for parking up on the hill. Now, do I understand correctly that each one of these lots only has one space mandated, or each unit has one space mandated? And what happens after the lot split?
Each primary unit has one space required. So if it's
Okay, so if you have a house, if you do a lot split and you have a house, and then you put the 3 ADUs, the junior, they don't have to have any parking.
you would have to have, for a urban lot split or 2-unit development, it's going to be a minimum of 2 primary units.
Okay.
So you wouldn't have 3 ADU
So that would create, you would have to have 2.
At least 2.
Off-street parking spaces.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Go ahead.
Are you asserting from 24 to 28 units, that's as every parcel that you're talking about is building 4 units?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
that's
just wanted to know your
basically the maximum. But of course, with the blanket zoning, you could also continue all that density down the hill, right, to Bayshore, and also down all the way to the mobile home parks.
Bayshore is not included.
Well, I know Bayshore isn't included, but you would be able to develop all the way down the hill to Bayshore with the new blanket zoning, the way I see the map up there.
Well,
Correct?
you already could.
What's that?
I mean, you already could because it's already in effect.
Well, yeah,
State
but
law.
I'm talking about the higher density that SB 9 provides for. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So lower acres, 24 to 28, but way more if you start building all around the hill and down to the main roads.
So thank you very much. So John, with the widening and the possibility of saying that, having more traffic is a detriment for safety, when would the planning department or building permit process look at that kind of situation from a particular development?
Well, that's already baked into the RBA zoning district, that you have to have a road of meets the city standards. So there's no case-by-case analysis. If someone's going to come in with a project, they need to demonstrate they have a public road access to their site.
Okay, and
It's baked into the code, and that's not changing.
And that wouldn't look at other impacts from a separate development. It would just be on that project itself.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
For John. So just to clarify for the public, if we've got lower upper Brisbane acres that when you see those maps, the properties are backed up the mountain. So the only way to get to property number 3 is through properties 1 and 2. So if you own those 2 properties, you're going to put a minimum 28-foot road through 2 other people's properties. That's where this all gets very complicated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, quick question, soils engineering reports, is that whose responsibility is that? Are we checking that regularly, or is that incumbent on the applicant or the county?
When a development is proposed, they have to do a soils report, engineering report, and they're subject to the city engineer's review.
Right.
Thank you. Next up is Sherry Goodwin. Sure, we can put you behind. Okay, Stephen Goodwin.
It's primarily because I went to the bathroom first. Okay. Good evening, council members and honorable mayor. So far, you've had great dialogue with a lot of information that I think is just very informative to the public. There were some questions that came up that Madison brought up that probably came from a letter that I had put together. And so I don't know how to dissect that out of here, but there's still some concerns that I've got, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, some people have exceeded the 3 minutes. Is that okay if I can do that
Can
too?
you speak into the mic?
Can I exceed
Yeah.
the 3 minutes? Okay.
Please.
All right. I have several objections with the current version of the RZ1 and 2 ordinance zone overlay. I believe it will lead to inflation of the privately owned lot prices and create massive development. Despite the city's claim that many lots in the RBA district lack public access and are unbuildable, I disagree with that interpretation. These ordinances would increase the value of the lot significantly. Many owners who purchased them long ago for just a song have been waiting for years to sell to a developer. So they would not have to foot the bill to widen Beatrice and create infrastructure to meet city requirements. I believe the ordinances would entice developers, such as a group like the Baylands Development, to offer purchase prices that can't be refused. The so-called lack of public access infrastructure identified by the city would go away under a comprehensive master plan. And Margaret Avenue and Beatrice would be connected together. Matter of fact, I've seen on the county map for the assessor's office, it shows Margaret and Beatrice joined together. So it was somebody's dream years ago, and they still show that. Hundreds of Brisbane citizens want a resounding commitment from the city to never sell its lower acres and the properties that they own and keep it in perpetuity as open space. However, connecting Beatrice and Margaret roads would require the city to sell some of its 42 acres it purchased through a grant assistance from the Trust for Public Land intended for open space. So again, I think it would be rather difficult to do. Creating dense housing units threatens our precious wildlife on the acres and creates a shell game that displaces animals from one site to another in a so-called land swap or a TDR. The transferable development rights and cluster development programs described in the Brisbane Housing 2023-2031 element preserving environmentally significant lands without sacrificing housing development potential. The program, ironically called the Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP, is worrisome since it's operated by the officials, including city managers from Daly City, South San Francisco, Brisbane, and the San Mateo County Parks Executive. I've got a question about the HCP. It has a significant revenue stream of about $380,000 for the 2024-25 fiscal year. The San Mateo County Parks Department invoices homeowners in HCP areas, including Brisbane residents in the Northeast Ridge, $60 annually. This would apply to newer, lower areas developed in any future development in the so-called HCP protected areas as well. The $275,000 revenue collected from homeowners in HCP areas does not provide vegetation management in the Brisbane acres. For what is the revenue being used for? It certainly is not being used to maintain city property in the acres. The trail between Beatrice and Margaret has been untouched for decades. The only obvious evidence of vegetation reduction is the annual Trinity and Kings Fire Break project managed by the North County Fire Authority. This neglect increases fire danger. The HCP says, quote, the proximity of fuel loads of existing structures and residences within Brisbane acre areas presents a serious potential threat to human life and health. This was written in 2007. Some cities mitigated the density using inherent with the SB9 creativity. One example, under the law, dwelling units have a setback of perhaps as much as 30 to 40 feet. I know that it was discussed earlier that maybe the RBA stays maybe 10 feet, but the reality is that the overlay certainly could increase some of those requirements for objective development. In conclusion, I ask the council to send the ordinance back to the planning department for revisions that mitigate densely developed construction. It is not drafted currently in the best interest of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Rachel McCraddock.
Thank you for clarifying that the city can be more conservative in its legislation than the state, depending on what happens with SB 450, right? I'm wondering if the attorney, Mr. McMorrow, has briefed you all on what federal protections might apply to the local forest ecology, because it is shrub oak and it's California coastal, and there are some federal protections, whether there's a butterfly there or not. So we could ask whether or not, short of making a private trust, which is not within your power to do, you could look at federal protections for the trees. And then we can specify which properties are subject to this, maybe maintenance of a forest in your yard. That would apply to the R1 zone, I think, more than any other. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. McMorrow?
I don't, I'd have to look it up. I'd have to.
Okay. It's an oak shrub forest, California coastal, most common in Southern California, but I think it might be here too.
Cool.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Tom Hines.
Let me have a minute. I have a question for staff.
Do you want to ask that before Mr. Hines starts?
Tom, can
You
you
can please
hold a sec?
approach, but Councilmember Cunningham has a
Don't mind.
question.
I have a question. I have a clarifying question from the previous speaker, Mr. Goodwin. SB 9 California Home Act. It says, and I just need you to clarify that this is correct, John or Tom, benefits homeowners, not institutional investors. This was the language I was looking for while you were speaking, Steve. Can you go into that, or Tom, one of you? Oh, okay.
I'll give it a shot.
Give me a shot.
Essentially, there are some baked-in provisions that would be more excluding to developers, and namely that a person who is doing a urban lot split is required to sign an affidavit that they will live on the property in one of the units for at least 3 years. And a developer, an entity, could not do that. That would be a person or a family member of the owner of the lot.
Okay, so this says here, this bill requires as a condition of a homeowner receiving a ministerial lot split. This bill also prohibits the development of small subdivisions and prohibits ministerial lot splits on adjacent parcels by the same individual to prevent investor speculation. Has that changed, or is that how it stands?
That's how it stands.
Thank you. Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members and Madam Mayor. Tonight, I'm not going to continue talking about astrology much.
Aw.
But I'm sure you're all aware of the symbol for Libra, the scales, the balance. This does not imply that Libras are balanced. What it is measurement. You measure this against that. And in this case, somebody's got their foot on the scale. I retired from architecture for several reasons. First, I was the one making these kind of drawings. Oops, I'm sorry. Anyway, I was the one making these kind of drawings, and I knew how deceitful they were. I couldn't continue the line. The second was being young and naive, not knowing how to fight back against zoning changes after months of work. One doesn't tell their plumber how to fix the toilet. One doesn't tell their dentist how to drill. But everybody tells the architect and the planners how to design. Architects and planners study this and make decisions only to be uprooted by a foreign speculator with money that can lobby to change our laws. Shame. I didn't want any part of that kind of corruption. This ordinance is not right. I've heard we have no options. We do. One is to work with other cities to resist this mandate. On the record is a letter from Susan Kirsch, founder and director of Catalyst for Local Control. I hope you've read that. I urge you to postpone this tonight and work with these folks. There's strength in numbers. I understand what Karen has said tonight about the CC efforts, but still that was like a handful. If we work with other cities, the burden gets shared. I've heard that we have no money to hire a lawyer. I've heard we're in a deficit. We have an attorney. If he works with other cities, the burden gets shared. Again, there's strength in numbers. If you join with other cities, you'd help put the power back into the hands of the people, your constituents, Brisbane residents, not Sacramento, not foreign speculators. I urge you to work for us. I know you're not getting paid and it's a thankless job, but you signed up for it. Work for us, please. Who is the zoning administrator? Appointed, elected, picked off the street? Most likely unfamiliar with Brisbane. May I please receive by email a list of qualifications for the position of zoning administrator? I believe there will never be affordable housing, no real programs, interest rates skyrocketing, inflation, higher and higher construction costs, and wages not increasing in pace. And you've pushed this before. Wasn't Measure JJ supposed to give us affordable housing? Will passage of this tonight allow the Baylands to quadruple their housing? Has the fire department weighed in on this? I don't see how fire trucks can manipulate any of the streets that you've shown in the plans. We have an election coming up in November. Let's let the people vote to fight this or not. Finally, I'd like to read 3 sentences from an attorney. What about pre-existing constitutional duties under the California Public Trust Doctrine? Public assets belong to the public and cannot be treated like private equity by implication in conceptual models. It's always been the law, but public servants and legal professionals have long acted as if they have permission to ignore it. The right to give or withhold consent is the essence of personal agency. It cannot be legally hardwired into policy models, even if a man named Trump wants it that way. Michael Warburton, Director of Public Trust Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Mr. Hines has brought up an interesting topic in two regards. One is there is a lawsuit that's been going on. I believe it started in Southern California. There are only 4 cities that I've identified in the Bay Area that are part of it. And one of the difficulties that they've faced, because I've been following it closely, is they don't have enough money. They're still asking more cities than the cities they have for money. It's very expensive. So they've not really gotten a lot of traction, which is why I suggest, when your elected official is running for election again to go to Sacramento, that's where they're going to listen to you. And the second question, I think, is when we talk about if we just don't pass this ordinance, SB 9 is still in effect, with or without our Brisbane ordinance. And one thing we haven't dealt with are why we might want to consider passing the Brisbane ordinance. What are the advantages to that? Because there are some advantages to passing this. Could you enumerate that, please?
Well, as mentioned before, we'll have a reduced building height within setbacks compared to what SB 9 would require. We would allow for open parking to maximize the opportunity to get the cars off the street. We'll allow for joint driveways to minimize the curb cuts, again, to retain as much on-street parking as we can. And we'll provide neighbor notification of these applications as they're processed.
One other thing, the other cities have only rezoned portions of their city, not the entire city.
Do you want to comment on that?
We're only rezoning these zones that SB 9 applies to, which are the R1 and the RBA. It doesn't extend beyond those 2 zones.
And so that would not include the proposed or any proposed Baylands development?
Correct, not at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, next slip is from Sherry Goodwin.
Just switch glasses here. Council,
You bring the mic down?
Yeah.
is that better?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Our mountain is what makes Brisbane beautiful and special, in addition to the wonderful people here. It is enjoyed by hikers and inhabited by diverse wildlife. In some ways, it's the heart and soul of our community. This proposal for blanket rezoning of our mountain set forth by the Planning Commission would change Brisbane as we know it. The density of housing above the mountain and down and around to Kings Road, Glen Park, Margaret Road, Paul Avenue, and other areas would easily be exceeded 3 or 4 times after rezoning. Do we really want Brisbane to look like Daly City? And if it's already state law, I don't see why we have to pass it. I created and am now submitting a petition with 224 signatures from Brisbane residents asking that our leaders not approve this rezoning and instead put it before the people in an election. We believe it will have too much impact on our community to be decided by 5 people. We are also asking that the city pass an ordinance that the Upper Acres property owned by the city cannot be sold for development or profit. Instead, we want to make the Upper Acres into designated open space and/or a park, especially since most of these lots were purchased with nonprofit grants or money for that exact purpose. In a perfect world, the remaining greenery of the mountain would be preserved for open space to be enjoyed by people and wildlife. We are asking the city to pursue a path of preserving open space in any way possible, or at least take a more creative approach than this plan in order to minimize housing on the mountain. Beyond aesthetics is the matter of fire danger. My street has been evacuated once and given a voluntary evacuation another time during fires. New construction increases the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI, where human development meets undeveloped wildland and fuels vegetative increased fire risk. Fire trucks already find our narrow, winding streets almost impossible to navigate. And speaking of fire, will these properties even be insurable as home insurance is being canceled or raised exorbitantly? This unofficial petition is kind of like change.org. Our attorney did not have time to prepare an intent to circulate document to go to the Brisbane City Attorney for prior approval, which could have taken several days. So it is a rushed response to share the concerns of residents who do not like this rezoning plan that has been postponed twice by the City Council and shared with the public only in the Star in the city's blast email. All of the signatures I am turning in represent Brisbane residents who care deeply about the future of this town and want their voices heard. We hope our city leaders are listening, and we humbly ask them to find another path besides this plan that was put before them by the Planning Commission. Who should I give the signatures to?
To the clerk, please. Thank you.
May I ask a question? John, could you please respond if the ordinance is not passed? Will the R1 and RBA zones still be under SB 9?
Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
And can also the city clerk let us know how the information was given to the public, how it was circulated? The information about this meeting and the,
All the city council
Yes.
agenda reports have been publicly noticed of when they'll be available. They've been available for every public hearing at least 72 hours before the meetings.
okay, and we also put the information on the blast in the city newsletter. We've talked about it in other ways, I'm sure. Maybe John has some more information.
Yes, just a quick outline. So we had the new informational web pages with FAQs put out in Massing also. We had an article in the July 1st Star with a QR code to those draft ordinance web pages. The city manager's weekly update blast item to subscribers, the city's social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, Nextdoor, etc. We had tabling at the farmer's market. We posted new notices for the meeting and also electronic signboards at the locations up in.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. Any other questions that came up from Ms. Goodwin's comments?
Only that my two neighbors who are both under 18 signed that petition. For what that's worth.
That's 2 out of 224. I didn't know.
Okay. Next up on the list is Linda Salmon.
My friends, honorable council, Madam Mayor, it's been a long time. Probably not long enough as far as you're concerned. Uh, In any event, I just kind of got notified about all this going on. First of all, I really appreciate that you all understand why we became a city, which is to protect the mountain and our homes, our little community and the nature of it, the tar paper shacks and all. And it matters. And it's terrible for the state to be trying to disrupt this, and hopefully we will fight it in the end. But I have a lot of concerns. One, I was really happy to see how many more properties we've got over this time after we first started this, 20, almost, 14 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. And yay. But what we do need to do, we need to close the loophole because we know about Fish and Game and Coastal Commission, and that is to actually make them open space for real, that nobody can build on them. And the point of doing this is partly to protect the mountain, but mostly to protect the people. This mountain, this acres, is subject to 3 of the 4 horses of apocalypse of California, which are earthquakes, wildfires, and mudslides. And as you know, the land here, the soil, gray wacky, is a crystalline clay. And when that crystalline clay gets heavy, it slumps, it slides, and it moves. And we've already seen this happen many times. I was shocked to find the little canyon above Castaños Canyon has had its mudslide. Half of it's closed off compared to how it was, 12 years ago? Yeah. Things happen, and they're going to keep happening. And how are we going to protect people? The road, I was up on Margaret. I couldn't believe they've actually built more houses on Margaret. New ones without a proper road. I thought that was forbidden. I thought somehow or another when we did the general plan, as you know, that was part of me, 2.5 years of my life, working on every single possible thing that could happen, that we made it very, very clear. No roads, no building. We saw what happened in the Oakland Hills. People we lost and the houses that were lost in the homes. If there were a fire up there now, people would just be dead. Lots of people, okay? It is untenable that this is going on. We can't have it. Not to mention the earthquakes, we really haven't had a good one. This mountain, this lovely mountain is an aquifer, as you probably have figured out by now. It draws up seawater and gives us fresh water. And we actually have enough water for the entire city of Brisbane as we exist now. Most of it's found in the quarry right now. Daly City has all their water from the mountain. It's one of the reasons why they couldn't make the aquarium salty enough, because they took the seawater right from where the mountain spills out its water into the ocean. Yes, and it's not as salty because it's fresh water from this mountain. It matters what we're doing and why we're here. And it matters that this mountain is the only refuge for all of San Francisco and Daly City and South City for many, many different reasons. So it matters that we keep Brisbane as it is. And it's going to take some time. And I know that you're all dedicated to it. I know you are. So please, let's do it. Let's figure out a way. I think that some of the things that I've heard about the current ordinances are still lacking certain provisions that could be tweaked, not just about the setbacks, but about all of it. The mudslides in particular are a real issue. The more that you have to dig in to build a road, the more it's going to come down. I mean, that's just the way it works. You see it on the top where Diaz was allowed to build right on top of the hill where the old rugged cross used to be when we were kids. And what's happening to the land? All the natural buttressing is being destroyed because you've got too heavy a weight pressing on it without the proper Nature buttresses the land. We have issues. We saw what happened in Buckeye, right? What happened? People were walking and walking and walking and widening the trails and taking out the vegetation. And all of a sudden you get enough rain, enough wet, and mud all over everything. This is what happens on this mountain. This is why people can't live up there, why they can't build up there. It's not a good idea. And who's going to be responsible? We are responsible, all of us. We cannot allow it. So we have to be able to stand up to the state, all of us. We've stood up to the county. We can stand up to the state and say, no. I know it's going to be tough, but we're going to have to do it. I rely on you all to do that.
Thank you. Any follow-up on that from staff needed?
I have a question for staff. John, do we have any new unpermitted homes that have been built on Margaret in the last 10 years?
No.
When was the last house built up on Margaret?
I would have to,
1975?
that sounds right. It would have been pre-HCP, I believe.
It was 1975, it's right next to Sean's house.
Okay, so we have a clarification that the last house that was built on Margaret was 1975. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question, please.
Yes, please.
John, if you want to take this question. So safety concerns have been brought up several times. And wildfire is one issue, but if we talk about, there could be earthquakes, could be any number of things. Safely egressing and evacuation. Who determines whether roads are adequate?
That'd be the city engineer and North County Fire.
And so based upon what we have, if someone wanted to do further development, would that be an evaluation of anyone developing lots above what currently exists?
Yes, they'd have to understand what kind of improvements would need to be done downhill or downstream to make sure it's adequate for emergency services. So if those roads needed to be widened or whatever, yeah, that would come out of that process.
Because we're talking the downhill portions, as been pointed out over and over, a lot of those areas, there's no way to improve what's there. So we're talking about an additional burden on the lower streets.
In terms of if the traffic,
Increased traffic, increased number of cars.
if indeed they could satisfy the city engineer and the fire marshal about the access, theoretically, yes.
And I think what's being brought up here is that if one of the conditions giving the city any kind of rationale for saying there are safety considerations in certain areas that should not be developed, that has to be examined.
Which it is for any application that would come up in the ridge, on the acres. That's part of what Public Works does in terms of evaluating the road system. That's baked into our process.
Okay, I think probably what the public is asking is if one person applies to develop a parcel, anybody's guess as to how many vehicles or people egressing that might be. But the concern is if one parcel is developed, there's a certain amount of infrastructure that goes with it. And then that invites development of more parcels, if I read what's being brought up here. And so I'm just kind of providing the feedback. I think that our residents are asking for some assurance that we will look beyond one parcel when we start evaluating whether the egress is sufficient. And I don't know whether we want to do that before anybody applies for a permit. That has a price tag. Everything we do has a price tag. But if there's a way that could be done, it might be worthwhile to look into.
Okay. DD Porter.
Good evening, Council. My name's Dee Dee Porter, and I've been a Brisbane resident for almost 17 years. I signed the petition to save the acres because I too want to prevent overdevelopment in the area above Kings Road. But I should have read up about the proposed ordinance and more about SB 9 and SB 1037. And I didn't, but that's okay. I have now. And it is my understanding that the ordinance does not mandate that we develop the areas. SB 9 can't be implemented in areas that don't have infrastructure. The ordinance doesn't seem to lessen any of the restrictions. It seems that it will help protect the town more. So all of this is in a reaction to, it seems to me, to SB 9 as opposed to the council's proposed ordinance. And the law does have some onerous elements to it. And while we must follow state law, our representatives in Sacramento can amend the laws. And therefore, I believe that all concerned residents should be contacting our state senator. And I'm happy to provide anyone who needs it with the number for his capital office or his district office, so we can communicate our concerns. And the building lobby may have his ear, but we have our voice and we have our vote. And as we know, every vote matters. So let's all make sure that our voter registration is up to date with our current address. You can do that on the SMC Acre website. And keep an eye out for your ballots that will be mailed beginning of next month. And then make sure we return our ballot and make our voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slip is Michelle Salmon.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident, lifelong Brisbane resident, in the words of John Burr. The Open Space and Ecology Committee drafted a letter and voted to send it to you. Some information has come to light since this letter was written and a better understanding, but in your indulgence, I would like to read it just so that people know that the Open Space and Ecology Committee really is about open space and ecology. Dear City Council, the open space has always had a significant role in the life of the Brisbane community. Residents, workers, and visitors have long recognized the city's unique geography and character with its dramatic location sheltered by the flanks of San Bruno Mountain and extending along the San Francisco Bay's shoreline. That's directly from our 2001 Open Space Plan. The Open Space and Ecology Committee was formed in 2001 to take active steps to do more than simply appreciate nature, but to work to permanently protect nature and form a sustainable relationship between the mountain, the bay, and the city. The upcoming decision to include the Brisbane Acres to satisfy rezoning must be reconsidered, maybe reworked, but more has come to light since then. Brisbane Acres are primarily wildland habitat. While it may seem feasible to develop up to 4 units per acre, is it reasonable? The Brisbane Acres are extremely susceptible to wildfire, and with very limited access for emergency workers and their vehicles. A fire could quickly spread to all of Brisbane. Additional housing in this interface zone will likely increase homeowners insurance for all of Brisbane. The Brisbane Acres, many of which are extremely steep and shallow soil structure, history of slope instability. This poor slope stability and slide potential can severely impact all downhill structures, especially during heavy rain periods. Publicly maintained access ways to the Brisbane Acres are currently substandard and inadequate to safely handle current access, much less additional burden of new development. The cost to our city to provide basic infrastructure access, including water, sewer, roadways, and services such as fire and police, will present ongoing monetary burden that will not be recoverable by development fees. While our state government is demanding more housing, this development will only serve the highest echelons and does nothing to address the needs of moderate or low-income housing. Any further development of the Brisbane Acres will forever change the face of Brisbane and the fate of San Bruno Mountain and the rare species that make their home there. As a community, we need to fight back against the state of California mandates of SB 9 and protect Brisbane and our open space. Respectfully, the Open Space and Ecology Committee. And we have worked really hard the city has worked really hard to acquire numerous acres, as shown by the map that's been up there several times. We recently changed the criteria for a priority preservation or parcel, and we're able to add 6 more parcels to the priority preservation area as voted on by you, and that was extremely appreciated. There were a lot of things that were talked about during the discussions that I want to try to bring some clarity to. And one of them is the role of the HCP versus habitat. The Habitat Conservation Plan that encompasses San Bruno Mountain was the first in the country, as many of you know, and it only covers the endangered species listed in the Habitat Conservation Plan, which is the Mission Blue butterfly and the Clippy silver spot and the San Bruno elephant and their respective habitats, which is different than our criteria for what we consider to be habitat worthy of conserving. And so although SB 9 says, oh, endangered species, yada, yada, it does not necessarily protect the acres. And I want to make that really clear, that just because it's in the HCP area doesn't mean that it would be protected under SB 9. And so we are very vulnerable. And we need to rezone all the open space acres that we've acquired so diligently to open space, even if it is parcel by parcel. I understand that is not a normal practice, but I think that that would add a level of protection and trust for those properties that have already been acquired, and that we continue to pursue acquiring the rest of the parcels. It was very clear when we said the city has tried to acquire all the parcels that were available with what we were willing to pay. That's different than acquiring all the parcels that were available, what we were willing to pay. So you had people who said, this is very important to us. You've had 220 signatures saying this is very important to us. And that means that what we are willing to pay may be a higher amount than we've been willing to pay in the past, but it's always a trade-off. And people need to realize it's always a trade-off. And I think that's an important thing that the people of Brisbane really need to realize, is that we only have so much. Where do you want it to go? Where do you want it to go? Do you want to save the acres? If you really want to save the acres, then put your money where your mouth is, and let's buy them one by one as we can that are priority conservation parcels. And then once we've acquired all of those, buy the rest of them. That's the only way to actually protect the acres. So let's get really real about it and work on it. In the meanwhile, I have questions about, will ridgelines and waterways still be protected as they were originally supposed to be protected? And so I just wanted to clarify that about when we say we have these priority preservation parcels, that doesn't mean that they would qualify necessarily for SB 9's. I just really want to make that clear. I guess the other thing is that we really do need to work hard on closing all the loopholes that we can for the acres and for the rest of Brisbane. And so I would feel very comfortable if you delayed this 2 more weeks and went thoroughly over everything that was gone over tonight and make sure that we have closed the door on everything that we can before we go ahead and commit to this. SB 9 is not going away in the next 2 weeks. And I don't know if, all the parcel owners are going to file, plans in the next 2 weeks. But I think giving ourselves a little bit of breathing room here to be able to really examine everything we've heard tonight, let the people in Brisbane understand the truth of the matter instead of all of the swirl and whirl that's been going around that's not true. And let's come to a consensus, because the only way that we're going to get through this is together. And I trust each and every one of you and our city staff that they have been doing their very best. And now we have a lot more feedback and a lot more understanding and a lot more desire on the part of the community to support the acres. So do your magic. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council that came up from her questions?
Madam Mayor, I have a question, please.
Please.
Question for John. So when I take a map showing the acres properties, in blue are the ones that are now under city control. There are 2 areas with contiguous properties.
Yep.
Here and here, and there's only 1 parcel here separating these 2. Could we not just, I'm not talking tonight, but I'm talking theoretically, take these contiguous properties and zone them open space? And also here, because when I look at the zoning maps for the Ridge, it's surrounded by open space. Why can't we do that? And can we do that?
Sure, we can look at it with the city attorney. I mean, we cannot spot zone parcels. We can't leave anybody as an island. So is there a way to do that? We can look at that.
Question to follow up. A trust was mentioned. So can we just put those in a trust? That way, no future council. I mean, I would assume if it's in a trust, then it also protects the future council action, Tom?
Yeah, I think confuse people. What I meant was trust-like. The city could go a little further in restricting the properties it's purchased was my only point. But I can work with John on that.
Okay.
And a question with that, Tom, as well. Would these properties, just because of the way they were acquired and that there may be future acquisitions, would it be helpful to amend the general plan and mention them specifically? So that it would be a little more assurance in perpetuity what the intent was when the city took possession of them?
I'll have to talk to John. I can't think of an issue with doing it, but I do want to talk to the planner.
Okay, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so just to follow up with all of this, Tom, my question was, how do we proceed with legally protecting the parcels? I know we put a letter out in June of 23, I believe, that said our intention was to have these parcels forever. But as we have spoken this evening, a future council could undo what our intention is. So I think what we would need to do is find out what does it cost and how do we do it? Because that is our collective intention, I believe, right? Right? That's our intention, but I might be here for another 4 years, but that's it.
We'll work with the planner on that.
Thank you.
So I do have a couple questions, and some of them go back to a couple other questions that were brought up by the public. One was on the assessor's map that show paper roads connecting from one road to another. Just because it's a paper road on the county's paperwork, does that necessarily mean that that road has a right to be built? Or is that just a pie in the sky paper road?
It has no status. It's a paper road. If there are easements, people may have rights to easements, but that's not a public right.
Okay, and so really to look at what paper roads may feasibly be built, we would need to get more information on what the easements were to access those paper roads or people's current easements that are there. But that wouldn't necessarily limit a current property owner from creating another easement or a different access method to their property if they've got the size of property to do that. And the money.
Yeah, it would have to be built to city standard, though. And you wouldn't have any private roads or substandard easements. It would all have to be done to city standard to connect to a road down to city standard.
And then be deeded to the city
Yes.
once that road was created.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I have,
And
sorry. when you-
if it's following up on the road, sure, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so, and I meant to call and ask you guys this question some time ago. Do we have an idea, just for everybody's education, what a road costs per foot? Do we have any idea?
Randy's not here.
Yeah, where's Randy? Jeremy?
I do not have an estimate. Sorry.
Yeah, we can get that information to you.
Yeah, I think that would be useful, because we know it's $250,000 for one sewer hookup. We know it's X dollars for something else. I think those numbers might mean something to the people who are sitting here relative to, can we actually build anything anywhere up there?
Yeah, like what's actually feasible.
Right.
And also to those state standards
To those states.
of.
And for not a
wanting heat.
developer.
Right,
Yes.
because this cannot be accomplished by a developer.
Nope.
You have to live on the parcel. So it is one person developing one parcel with doing a lot split and getting 4 units, and then assuming that every single other parcel that could possibly be developed also wants to share their space with 3 tenants on their property.
Right. So if anybody's interested, where I've been reading some of this information is focus.senate.ca.gov/SB9. And we'll put that on our website.
So I do have another question that was brought up, and that's on the ridgeline and waterway protection. When a parcel is being looked at by the planning commission, we have a wetlands or a waterway protection built into that, I'm assuming?
That would be another exclusion under SB 9. You can't build in a wetland. You're not eligible to use SB 9 in a
And a
wetland.
wetland would include a
waterway.
A waterway, whether it
Mhm.
was a dry waterway at a certain time or not.
As long as it has the right kind of vegetation and characteristics, yes.
Okay. And then do we have ridgeline protections at all?
There are a number of lots that have already been identified in the RBA zone as ridgeline lots. And we put a height limit for SB 9 developments on those ridgeline lots that's lower than the standard height, 25 feet height.
Okay, so there is some additional protection for ridgeline lots. That's all my questions for staff at the moment. I don't have any more slips. Do we have anyone online that would like to speak?
I have a hands raised from Prem Law.
Prem, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good evening, council members and Madam Mayor. Also to the city attorney. I just wanted to make a quick comment. There was a question raised about the properties purchased by the city and the acres being put into a trust. And Mr. McMorrow mentioned something to the effect of something that is trust-like. And the term trust-like has no legal definition. And I would like to know specifically what that means. Not necessarily at this meeting, but I would like to know in writing what a trust-like setting would entail and whether it would undermine any of the legal properties of a trust. Thank you.
Does Tom want to comment?
Tom, do you want to weigh in on that? But I'm assuming that because you would need more time to research and to find out what those parameters and what's legal within the state and city laws, that you'd need more time to come up with some protection measure that the council could use.
Well, my understanding from this council for a very long time and prior councils is you want those to be used for the purposes that they were set aside for the purposes for which they were bought, which is not development, and we want to make that as strong as possible.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online who'd like to speak?
No, Madam Mayor, I see no more hands raised.
Okay, before I close the public hearing, I'd like to give an opportunity for those who have not spoken yet to come up and speak. I see a hand raised from Paul Buscal.
Paul Buscal, Brisbane resident. Thank you, council. So it sure would have been helpful if we would have known that the council pretty much felt very strongly about not building in the acres. And when we were asking to have the maps reflect the almost 50 acres that were purchased by the city, instead of having all those acres listed as the Brisbane Acres Residential District, that's been going on for months. I think we could have saved a lot of people's concerns had we known that the council would have asked to have those maps changed. And I don't understand, the SB 9 doesn't say, well, you're going to build on the acres. They're going to say, you're going to build the acres because you set those acres aside to be built on by having them listed as Brisbane Acres Residential District. Those, as you know, and you've stated, those acres were purchased because we wanted to protect them. And open space doesn't mean protected. Open space, as you know, just means public property. So the only people that are going to build on the acres, unfortunately, are developers. And people that purchased acres and wanted to build on those acres, unfortunately, didn't get that opportunity. It was good to hear tonight that you're talking about making plans to make sure we protect those acres. It can't be a conservation easement because there was never a use there, like dairies and other places that get conservation easements, but it could be a preservation on the clause on their deeds. Because yes, a governing body could have a southeast ridge in Brisbane. And the Coastal Conservancy and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that gave the matching monies to purchase those also have an allowance, as it was stated tonight. If you pay it back, a governing body could change the distinction of those acres. So I wish you would have came forward with this feeling of wanting to save the acres yourselves months ago, and had those maps changed and had that discussion with our city attorney when there were people like myself that came to the meetings and expressed just that. And now all of a sudden we want to do that. So I'm hoping this has evolved from you all and staff talking that we need to revisit this. I mean, why wasn't the Parkside plan put in that plan? Why wasn't other sites like Consolidated Freight or that yellow trucking company, that big parcel up there? Because we've always talked about wanting to have connectivity from the ridge into Brisbane with neighborhoods. And that's kind of what the Parkside plan was starting to do. Instead of going up on the mountain where we're having problems with all kinds of issues. And the comment was made tonight that there really isn't any federally listed protected species in most of the acres because it's in the forest. That's true. However, the whole premise behind purchasing those was to protect the habitat, regardless of what was there. So I appreciate the council making that comment tonight about revisiting this. I don't think we're ready to make a decision tonight. I mean, the issues just here in town alone are enough to revisit it and maybe rewrite some things. But the thing with the acres, once that map is acknowledged, is to we approved what you have on that map, that's a done deal. So we're talking about calling up senators, calling Washington, calling here, calling there, writing letters, making phone calls, but it starts here. And we've been calling you and we've been coming to you and we've been asking for your help. So I hope you can help us tonight and come up with a plan that's palatable for this community. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we'll go to people who have not spoken yet first.
Hello, I'm Lisa Greenlee, longtime resident and member of our Park and Rec Committee. Just some background, I was on the Open Space and Ecology Committee years ago in the 90s when we were actively pursuing buying a lot of these lots. And you realize that a lot of the acre lots are owned by private citizens. And we could only purchase them when they were willing to sell them to us. You cannot force somebody to sell. So, but we actively went out. And our only reason for actively pursuing these lots was for open space. That was just obvious. It wouldn't have gone to our committee if any, I mean, the whole reason was for not developing them and keeping them for open space. So the thought that the city owns them to develop is ridiculous, really. And if it's just a matter of semantics, that just needs to change. And that seems like a good fix. And I think you guys are on top of it. The other thing about developing in areas like that, I looked to buy a house one time up on Margaret. And the issue of no one owning those roads is a real problem for all those homeowners. Because anything they want to do, like if I wanted to buy a house that I wanted to make nicer, bigger, whatever, I would be responsible for that whole road. And you would have to convince everyone on that whole road to cooperate to pay for that road so I could do my project. And that's just not going to happen. I mean, you just can't get people to shell out money for stuff that, you know, on a road that doesn't benefit them. They're fine on that goofy road. So I realized that buying anything up there was kind of pointless, you know, unless I wanted to only own that property and that land frozen in time. Mm-hmm. And that property is frozen in time, pretty much. Also, didn't we just pass a rule or a law that says that in order to get a building permit, period, you have to have a road stabilized from slides or anything before you're even given a permit? No?
I don't know, but we can ask staff when you're done.
Okay, well, just because I know that some people have, you know, with the last slides that we had in this last big rains, we had some slides in unfortified lots that, you know, they had undercut the road and the road was sliding onto other people's property. And you can't just build a house or even get a building permit without having a stable road. That just doesn't happen. I've also built a house in this town, and I know how much the inspections of all your soil, all of the slides, everything is just so rigorous. It just makes it, unless it's a slam dunk that you have a flat lot, even in my area where it's pretty flat, it was months and months and months and months of testing. And I just don't think that anything with any possibility of slide will ever get developed. That's just my opinion. So just wanted to put it out there. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I know the question that Lisa was referring to, John, was about, we're talking about the reference of probably Santa Clara Street doing the public improvements before building your home.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a timing, and that was adopted in ordinance to make sure the timing of the public improvements are in place before the building permit for the private improvement can happen. Yes.
Great, thank you. So we have no one else online, and we're now going to go back for a second round. Michelle, or somebody else, Michelle wanted to speak a second time. Please be brief.
I'm sorry, I meant to say this the first time, but it was brought up in the discussion about maintenance of the mountain, the habitat conservation money, and the acres. And I just want to make it really clear that the habitat conservation money is distributed by the county across the entire mountain for habitat maintenance for the Mission Blue butterfly, the Clippy silver spot, and the San Bruno elephant. Our own acres that we own, the city owns, has a maintenance program also. And every year you approve a budget for open space and ecology, and we hire contractors that go out and do work on those acres and to try to maintain the habitat. And I just really want to make sure that people know that, because it's not hidden. If anybody ever came to our meetings, they'd know this. We have a report once a year about the work that's been done in the habitat. So, and the council's been very responsive and very supportive of that. And there's no secrets. It's all out there. So we have been maintaining the acres. Thank you, that we own. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Peter Sutherland, resident again. Just a quick question. We were talking about getting contiguous lots in the lower acre or in the upper acres in order to connect the city-owned lots. And my question is, since you guys can approve zoning, could you just zone any private lot in order to get those continuous or contiguous lots without eminent domain or any other way to acquire them?
That's something we'll have to ask the attorneys. I do believe that while we can quote unquote up zone properties, it's very difficult to down zone a property with a blanket overlay. Is that the case, John?
I'm talking about like zoning for open space, designated open space.
That would be to down zoning. So let's ask the staff that question.
Normally, if you're down zone somebody and leave them no economic use of their property, that raises certain legal issues.
But it is possible, isn't it?
Possible. I would defer to the city attorney and others
Great
about whether
practice,
that's
but,
good practice.
Let's just say to get those lots, contiguous lots together to create a continuous space for wildlife. If there was like one lot that was keeping that contiguous space from being joined, is it possible to take over that one lot through zoning?
Tom, do you want to take that one for us?
I'm not sure if you get the question. John, why don't we're going to be talking tomorrow anyway, if you understand. Do you get it? I don't. Okay, thank you. We'll cover it.
You didn't understand the question? I'm sorry.
No, but John did. So we're going to be talking about this tomorrow, so we will cover it.
Okay, and then I have one more question. Who owns the rights to Beatrice? Who has the easement on it? Is that a city-owned easement, a county-owned easement, or is it owned by the the people who own the lower acres private lots?
Through the chair, I'll give Peter over here, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Some basic information. I can't speak specifically to the roads, but typically either road is in public ownership, like most of the roads here in Brisbane are.
Then since Beatrice isn't much of a road, I'm just wondering, it's basically just an easement, right?
We'd have to look at it, but I'm going to run under the assumption, based on what I've heard tonight, that it has some relationship to public responsibility. A road like Margaret may be a private road, and in that case, there's no responsibility related to the city to maintain it or otherwise. So, as a previous speaker spoke to that, the obligation for any work would be through those homeowners. And in some cases, what happens if it's a large enough area, they create an HOA to fund it or some mechanism.
So then just one more short question. So Beatrice basically bisects the upper and lower acres, correct? Anybody disagree with me on that?
I couldn't.
Okay.
I don't know.
So another question I have is, if we, in order to keep Beatrice clear, and maybe this was already addressed, but does someone, is the city on the hook to build retaining walls? I think Colleen brought this up in some form or shape. Is the city responsible for retaining walls if Beatrice is right up against the upper acres? And also, is the city then responsible for creating a safe fire zone into the upper acres in order to keep Beatrice clear and as a safe street, and also the lower acres property safe if there ever is development there?
I think we're getting into legal designations as far as
I won't ask
property
any more of
rights.
these questions.
I don't think that we can answer that now with any
These are great
assurity.
questions.
They're great
Oh,
questions.
they're great questions. I
But,
mean,
but I think that it depends on the ownership of the property and the roadway.
Sure. Well, that's
And-
why I'm asking these questions
Well,
about
and
the road.
and it's been
Yeah.
spoken to us before that people are unsure of who the ownership is
Okay.
in some instances.
Through the chair, Peter, we've been capturing the questions tonight, but just to make sure that we got everything right, feel free to send me an email tomorrow with your questions. So I've got them captured.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your extra time.
May I comment on this?
Sure, please. But I would, if we're making comments, I think I'd rather wait until we close the public hearing.
Sure.
So that then we can have a open discussion. So I'm gonna put a last call out for anyone who's not spoken. We have no one else who's not spoken. We do
Oh.
have one person here.
Madam
Okay,
Mayor,
please come on up, Ron.
I also have one more, Madam Mayor.
Online, okay, we'll get to them next.
Thank you.
Good evening, council and mayor. It's going to be a refreshing change of attitude right now because I feel, just having heard what's going on, like being on the Capitol building the day that the Proud Boys attacked it, say, wait a minute, just because you got your information from the President of the United States doesn't mean you're stopping any steal. You're rather enabling the steal. And that's what's really happening here, is enabling, or people are attempting to enable a steal. The uppermost acres, I don't care how you handle that. You bought them, do what you want with them. My argument, as it was before, was about existing properties on existing streets, private streets as it is, with utilities, with everything except this final line drawing on what is demanded for the street widths and all the other things. I think that, that there are so few properties. What do you, I mean, you're making capitalists look good. Going out for every dollar they can get. You're going to try to take every little lot. There are a few lots on Paul and very little on Margaret. They're big enough to accommodate off-street parking. If you don't want to have the multiple unit designation where they're, the ADU, big and little and all the stuff, just keep it to a single building. I'm happy with the building I have where I'm at. I'd like to be able to do something to it, but with the existing laws, it prohibits anything to do even anything on an existing building. I think you could easily make rules that would accommodate the people that are living here, been living there, been owning property there, and they're not infringing on the environmental movements or anything. You're just recognizing their property rights and the fact that they were in long ago. Those properties were established long ago. It's flailing at a non-enemy. It's not, these are since I had no paper here, I wasn't able to take notes. I'll have to follow. But the one thing is, I was at the not the open hearing. I was at the, it was the open hearing on the land use for the park is now. And, it was such a fraudulent thing. If you knew what was going on, I think I was the only one not in the city that knew what was going on. They had what should have been an open hearing to establish the land use. And then once you've established the land use, then you have architects do things and work on and all that stuff. We came to the open hearing and all that had already been done. Behind the scenes, in private committees, under the table, so to speak, because nobody in this town, if they had participated in an open hearing on the land use, would have said, oh, we should put a city hall and a fire department there. I think that trumps anything like a park. That would not happen in an open hearing. And that's why they set up the private committee meetings. The people are in those committees are innocent. They were trusting people that were thought they were being given reasonable, all the possible alternatives. They weren't. Like the one committee member says, we never heard anything about a park. Well, this is what happened now, because recently some people were talking about being on the open space. And I applied to be on the first open space when Fred Smith first started that. And Fred tells me when I'm there at the meeting, he says, oh, you can't be there, Ron. You can't be in this committee. I said, why is that? Because you live in the acres. Oh, where's my residence got to do? What's that got to do? Because we're going to be talking about the acres first. And I thought, huh? How would that exclude? And I regret now not having been more insistent on being admitted regardless of that absurd requirement. Because it doesn't make sense. That means only the people in the acres would be able to make judgments on the core of Brisbane in that committee. You know, like it was because he had an agenda to put forth in the open, in the acres, as everybody is endorsing tonight. And it was all rigged just as the private committees to set up City Hall where the park is now. I'm not big on conspiracies, but this was happening right in front of anybody's observant face. So being I couldn't take notes, I had a lot of other points I heard in the evening that I would like to respond to, but just to give you a refreshing break from all the assault of the, I call them the proud, and the Proud Boys were doing what they felt was right. They were saving our country from a steal. And everybody here that's arguing so strenuously about, hey, Margaret and Paul, don't let anything happen. Harold Road, which I also lived on, has a sewer line running through it. All the paving is taken place by the assessment district they set up to put the sewer line in. It's not a big deal, and you can get back through there. The fire trucks can get back through there. The fire trucks can even get on Paul and Margaret. It's what kind of excessive demands you want to put on streets that are already in place. If you want to put these on streets that don't exist yet, you can do what you want. But it's absurd when the streets, Margaret and Paul, slope-wise and any other consideration, are no different than 90% of the upper streets in Brisbane. Margaret, Humboldt, Tulare, you show me the difference. So anyway, just give you another point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay. We do have one other person. We do have one other person online that'd like to speak.
Dana Dilworth says, please let the council know they could have an ordinance to inquire the highest building to mitigate by cooperation with others.
What? Can you say that again?
Please let the council know they could have an ordinance to inquire the highest building to mitigate by cooperation with others. I don't know if she meant acquire.
Acquire.
I'm confused.
I'm confused also, but that's okay.
I do want to make this comment.
Okay, please, well, are we closing the
Oh,
public
sorry.
hearing?
I'm just ready to go.
Oh,
I need a break after we close the public hearing.
okay. Paul, and that's the last one, and we'll close the public hearing after Paul. You'll get the last word.
Paul Buscal, Brisbane resident. So I also wanted to mention that on the original map for the acres that was green with all the parcels, there are also 2 blue parcels way above in the highest reaches right at the county's border that say Brisbane Water Department. So could you please look at those 2 parcels and see why those 2 parcels would be set aside for the Brisbane Water Department above the highest acres?
Yes.
Sure,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, with that, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I'm sorry, somebody said something. Was that up here?
She already did. She commented twice.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Aye. So we are gonna take a
10-minute break.
5-10 minute break. And we'll come back. Thank you.
Caroline? Do you remember this clip?
They're never five.
They're never fine.
They're just never five.
2019.
Everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like you haven't done this. Okay,
Mike's are on.
Sure that the property that the city owns or will acquire within Brisbane Acres, which are designated as habitat preservation and open space, remain as such in perpetuity. So we did do that back in 2019. That has been on our books since 2019. What everybody has asked here tonight, and with the help of our legal team, we will be making that an even stronger document for the future. But I just wanted to bring to your attention that we did not ignore that we actually did do this back in 2019. Thank you.
I would believe that would be the declaration of restrictions on those properties that the city is, that I referenced earlier.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So we have had a lot of testimony from staff, a lot of documents from staff. And, now's the time for discussion. One of the things I've heard is both from legal and from our planning staff is that there's room for some discussion in the next couple days. So does that mean that we as a council want to punt this to the next meeting where we do not reopen the public hearing, but find out what staff has brought to us as in regards to any changes that may need to be clarified? Or is that something we want to try to move forward tonight in approving the document as it is?
So some of the safety concerns that have been brought up, some of the clarifying around strengthening up the declaration of restrictions, taking it one step further, is that what we're talking about? The
Well-
shrub oak thing that was brought up, are those kind of things that you're talking about?
Those kind of things, and I think also where the actual ownership in some of the roads was, that there were some questions that
Notifications.
and notifications, when notifications could begin, notifying neighbors of a projected project, timing of that, little niggling things, I think. But is that what the council would want to do?
So, there was a lot of information that was given tonight. And I think that there's a heightened concern as well from the community. And so I think out of respect for the community, to let the community soak in this information. Of course, being on the council, we have access to staff, right? We're asking those questions, we're getting the answers. And a lot of that came out tonight. There's probably still some more information for folks in the community to absorb. So I don't see any reason why we should make that decision tonight and perhaps have it at a future meeting. But I just want to say that I appreciate everyone who has come here tonight and the folks that, wrote, because they care, right? You don't step before us, at the podium if you don't have a concern. And, we all respect that. And so I think it makes sense to, so.
Also, I'd like to say that I think it's been clear just in many of the correspondences that I've received that there's been a lot of misinformation about what this ordinance does and about what is possible and isn't possible and what is what is imminent and not imminent, especially asserting that there's a 240 unit development happening. And, if I was hearing that from a neighbor, I would be very concerned and I would be coming out with my pitchfork, or I would be, writing that I would be against some kind of development plan. And I think that hopefully at this meeting, it's become abundantly clear what the ordinance does and doesn't do, and clarifies that for the community so that we can maybe apply pressure in other places where we can move the needle, like with our state senators and that sort of thing. and how what the intention of the Brisbane City Council is or isn't, hopefully is a lot more clear after this evening. And I hope that information gets out to, 250 people who may have put their name on a petition but haven't showed up here physically tonight, that things that they might have thought were true are not.
Well, I agree with you, Madison, about like us as a council writing some kind of joint letter to our state representatives, Becker and Pappen, and, just about how the state legislature is applying these one size fits all type of laws. I mean, these legislators most of them were council members at one time. We're their constituents, and we represent our community. And so having something from us, I think also demonstrates to the public that we care about this stuff and we care about the character of our town. We know that we have an affordable housing crisis. Nobody's denying that, but we need to do it on our own terms that works for us.
Well, I think ultimately also these blanket type bills, they don't take into consideration the unique characteristics of communities and the environmental impacts that such bills have. And there's nothing that this council can do to prevent SB 9 style developments from happening when it's state law. And we try to implement everything that we possibly can to make it more difficult. But if somebody wants to do it and has the means to do it, provided it meets all of our standards, they can. So I don't think that anyone here on the city council is out to try to make mass development happen in the acres or frankly throughout central Brisbane. And certainly we can dive deeper into that. I don't think I'm going to be here at the next meeting, but I would certainly be happy to lend my signature to a joint letter if the rest of the council felt that that was appropriate. I mean, I think it's really important I would like to weigh in. So we'll see. We'll see if that's a possibility. But any reassurances that we as the council can provide, I'm happy to do. Just, I think that the community needs to understand that there's a limit to the authority that we have when something is state law.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If there's one thing I had hoped to accomplish tonight, and I hope that we have, first of all, is to understand that just because we sit up here doesn't mean we don't have the same concerns you do. And before tonight, I couldn't have told you where every single one of my colleagues stood on this issue because we've not had a meeting to discuss this. This is the first time we've actually openly discussed it. And the reason is by state law, we can't discuss it. I can't just call up every person on the council and say, hey, what do you think of this? I can't do that. We're not allowed to do that. So this has been productive for us as well. I think we have a greater idea where we stand. And the other goal that I would have wanted tonight from all of my reading is that our residents understand there's SB 9 and there's this ordinance. And SB 9 is going to be here whether this ordinance is passed or not. But the interesting part, if you really read the ordinance, it's not there to rubber stamp SB 9. It's to take SB 9 and say, we're going to assert the areas of local control that by SB 9 we're allowed to. We don't have to. So if we don't, shame on us. So that's an important distinction. And there were so many things brought up tonight, really, really good suggestions and concerns from all of you. And I'm so grateful for that. I would love to, my suggestion to my colleagues is continue this to another meeting so that there's ample time for staff and the city attorney and our city manager to really address a lot of the particulars that have been brought up and bring it back. And I wouldn't even want us to lock in 2 weeks or a time period. Maybe it'll take less time, maybe it'll take more time, but coming back with all the answers to things where we said, I don't know, we have to look into it.
So I do have a question for staff, and I am amenable to bringing this back to a future meeting. But on the public hearing S, do we need to go through the motions, or can we continue that item along with item R?
I think you can do what you just did as a continuation unless the attorneys want to do it a little differently, but I think that that's just fine. I think the message is clear.
Okay, because,
Yeah, that works fine.
okay. So if that's the will,
Sorry, as a clarifying point to what you said before we're moving on, because this might be the only time that I could say anything about this. The ordinance, right, implements uncovered parking, height restrictions, setbacks. Those things make developments more difficult. They don't make them easier. If somebody wanted to do an SB9 style development on their property, they have to make the puzzle piece fit. They have to make sure that they could fit 4 units in the parking and the setbacks and all these things. And so the more regulations you put into place, the harder it is to make the puzzle fit. When you do that, you are essentially limiting development as much as possible within the parameters that we can with state law. So if you are truly concerned about development and overdevelopment, then theoretically, you should be in support of provisions that make that development harder. And that is what the intent of this ordinance is tonight. So,
The idea is that we want to reduce the impacts of these state bills to us as much as we possibly can, not the other way around.
yes.
so rather than say we are trying to make development harder, we're trying to make it safer. We're trying to make it more amenable to the neighbors.
Yeah.
We are trying to ensure that our community is safe. It's not that we're trying to put extra barriers necessarily. We are just trying to make sure it's done to our standards and that it meets our requirements as best we can. So I wouldn't want to be saying we want to make it harder. That may be the implication, but we're doing it for a safety reason, doing it this action that we may or may not be taken, but that's what this overlay is meant to be.
Well, for clarifying, I guess if that's a statement that we are concerned with making, I would say that we are trying to take as much, for me personally, I don't have a problem saying this. I think that from my perspective, the more control that we can try to have, the better it is for us as a community. So why don't we do everything possible to ensure we have as much control over this beast as we can get? That's the point.
Because the senators are shoving these bills through as quickly as they can and as fast as they can. 450 came through like a freight train. And it was passed at an enormous positive way. I will tell you that Senator Becker was absent for that vote. I do not know why. We can only imagine. But these bills are coming through like a freight train. And so we have to wrestle back as much control as we can.
So we are in agreement to go ahead and continue this meeting to a future date. We don't have to put in a lock-in date. We can do it based on when staff feels it's appropriate to have the necessary information and changes to the ordinance.
That would be fine. I was consulting with our community development director, and we were going to ask for to be as thorough as possible, a month, but without, but the additional flexibility is appreciated. We will not take any more time than we need.
I would
Okay.
prefer that.
And with that, item S, we will continue to a future meeting also. And so we will go ahead and move on to staff reports. Is there a city manager's report on upcoming activities?
Yes, going to focus my comments on upcoming activities, and the one activity I wanted to point out to residents is actually something I've mentioned in a couple weeks anyway. Caltrain electrification is coming, and on September 22nd, there will be a small event at the Brisbane station celebrating that. So I hope if you're interested, come on out. Mayor will be there. Thank you very much.
We officially continued item S, right?
Yes, is
Okay.
continued. And then we will go to mayors and council matter, update on vacancy on the Open Space Ecology Committee and IDEA committees.
Mayor and council members, Glenn Fieldman has resigned from OSEC on July 24th. She has a term that expires January of 2026. Additionally, in OSEC, we have 2 seats that will expire January of 2025. We are suggesting that perhaps, if it's council's pleasure, we can recruit now to fill these 3 seats and schedule interviews next year, January of 2025. Secondly, Miyoko Naida has resigned from the IDEA Committee on August 30th.
I'm sorry, who?
Miyoko Naida from an IDEA Committee on August 30th. She had resigned. She had a term that expires January of 2025. Additionally, we have 1 seat that will also expire January of 2025. So again, the recommendation is the city can recruit now to fill these 2 seats and schedule interviews January of 2025 or beyond. So
That'd be fine. I think.
Would that be council's pleasure?
Yes.
Yes, as soon as possible. Thanks.
Okay. Then we have an update on the city council meeting schedule.
Correct. The following is being proposed for the remaining council meetings in 2024. October 3rd, it is proposed to have that special meeting regarding best practices and code of conduct workshop. We'll have regular meetings on this October 17th and November 7th. There will be a special meeting regarding a mayoral rotation on November 21st. And then we'll also proceed with the regular meeting. December 5th, we'll have a regular meeting, but we're proposing our next December meeting to be December 12th instead of December 19th. And December 12th is when we will have the proposed reorganization.
And we feel that we'll have the county election certified by that date.
Yes, they have 30 days, so that it should be good by
Okay.
the 12th.
We're all okay with those dates?
Yes.
Okay. Countywide assignments and subcommittee reports. Colleen, do you have anything?
Yes, and I'm going to make it brief. Peninsula Clean Energy meeting in August after a summer break. And in coming months, I'm going to be detailing PCE has a new strategy to make home electrification more painless. This will be an innovative model, providing a one-stop resource for customers to get information both about rebates and financing, finding out about what appliances and projects might be suitable for their homes. And this is going to be, this is really big, a free on-site evaluation of your home. So instead of wondering, do I have to upgrade my panel? Should I think about, do I have space for a heat pump, water heater, or furnace, and so on? They would send someone to your home and give you a full evaluation of all the possibilities at no cost to you. Take it back to the PCE offices and give you a report, including a couple contractor estimates on what it would cost if you did any number of things or all of them. So this is going to be a really big change, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I will be bringing little excerpts every month as it starts getting rolled out.
So
Thank
you
you.
can find that on the website?
It's probably not there yet. It's really new. It was just introduced to the board. I doubt if they've gotten it on the website yet.
No.
Okay, Cliff, do you have anything?
Not the county level, city level, Madison and I had what do we call it? The best practice ad hoc subcommittee. So we looked at a variety of code of conducts from various cities, and we liked the city of Coma as the one. And the reason that we did, we looked at, there was a, and I'm sure, we're going to get into it when we bring it back, but just briefly, the reason we liked it, because it was the shortest one, right? And it talked about, coming together and supporting one another and having greater communication with the public. And, and so those things were, those things appealed to us. There were some that were pretty strict and rigid, and those felt like not in the Brisbane spirit. So I don't know, you want to add anything else to that one?
Look forward to hearing about it in our workshop.
Yeah, I would say that it was short and to the point, but covered a lot of different areas and was things that I think that we could all easily agree upon. Of course, we're gonna massage it, but it was good inspiration.
Yeah.
I was on every meeting on this list, so I could just make this fast.
Okay.
We had several public art advisory committee meetings. We talked about the turtle and the helix at Firth Park for public art. And those are slated for repair. And we will do RFPs for those sculptures to get painted, likely sometime in the spring. Then there's the Alvarado to San Benito stairway project. And we thought that, especially from meeting with our consultants who are helping us with the master plan, some of the best art is art that's incorporated into the design of other things. So that's railings, lighting, that sort of stairways. So we're hoping to we're hoping to have an RFP out as we're getting ready to construct that stairway to see if we could incorporate art at the ground floor of that project. And so while we don't have a public art master plan yet, our public art consultants have weighed in on that process and the RFP and have given their expertise. And then we also went over the results of the survey. And, I know this was brought up in public comment. When you create a master plan, there's several layers of community outreach. So we put a survey out, we got feedback. Now we expand upon that, possibly with workshops where people come in person, or we may have like a draft where then people weigh in. This is just the first step in the process, is figuring out what are people gravitating towards, what's resonating with them, and then further building upon that. They put a whole layout of a possible master plan with all the different elements that would be included. And so as a committee, we went over, curation, we went over maintenance, we went over all these different areas that they're going to then start working on. So it's definitely full steam ahead on the public art master plan. So I don't know if you have anything that you want to add.
Just that, that process is so complicated. I'm really glad that we are part of that because we understand process and how that works. I think, maybe at some time in the future, we won't need to have us guiding the public art process, but for now, I am so glad that we're there.
And then lastly, Karen and I also met with Julie Sims and Trudy Davis, who are the chair and vice chair for Park and Rec Commission, and we discussed their priorities for the year, things that they have been working on that they're proud of, and asking for some direction about what they should be thinking about in the future. And then we also together had a conversation about Volunteer of the Year for this year and chose a recipient.
And that was very exciting.
So the only meeting I had, and it was at the county level, was the technical working group for the SFO roundtable. We had some very good information on trying to find ways to convince the airlines and the air traffic controllers how to reduce noise by either flying an offset on landing from the published path so that they're further out over the water, and on takeoffs actually flying the published route instead of being vectored. That will not necessarily give us any relief from takeoffs, but it's a good start on trying to open the dialogue between the air traffic control and the airlines themselves, and trying to figure out the best way to evaluate when flights are working and when they're not. But that was about it for meetings that I had.
May I ask you a question on that?
Certainly.
Did they give you any update on the what they called post-COVID increase in air traffic at SFO, whether that is still happening or whether it has reached a plateau, or do they
They were still
anticipate?
expecting some of the busiest times last couple weeks ago. We did not get into that because this was a technical working group
Okay.
and not the regular SFO roundtable.
You just refreshed my memory, Terry. I did, cover for you at the SFO roundtable, and I had not been part of the roundtable in, how long you been on? 6 years?
5, 6 years,
5 or
something
6
like that.
years. So it was nice to go there, though I was shocked that there was no member, maybe there was 2 members of the public in the audience. And when I was the chair of the roundtable, we'd have a packed house every night, and it was harsh. People were up in arms, talk about pitchforks. It was pitchforks every single meeting. But it was also nice to see Kathleen Wentworth, and you guys are going to be, trying to fill some big shoes. It was great.
They have done a new hire for
Okay.
for Kathleen, the executive director. I have not met her.
All right.
And I don't think it's been made public yet.
Got
But
it.
we're really looking forward to the new leadership there. And so, but that's about all I can say about that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, thank you very much for covering for that meeting for me.
Absolutely.
Moving on to written communications.
One more comment.
Oh, sorry.
My home will be on the electric tour. Please make an appointment to come pick it apart. Through PCE. Our
I
home
was
is
going to
on
ask you
the-
which electric tour you were talking about. You're
Yeah,
talking about. the
home
PCE
electrification tour, I
I
guess they
gotcha.
call it, right?
Okay.
That's me.
Okay, written communications.
We had communication from Faust regarding Silver Spot Nursery lease and funding, Dilworth rezone editor, Ames rezoning Brisbane Acres, Noonan OSEC response letter to rezoning proposal, Goodwin reject 2024 RZ1, RZ2, Ramirez fire in the ring, Dilworth rezoning Brisbane ordinances.
Thank you. And that moves us on to oral communications number 2. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, do we have anyone online?
No, Madam Mayor.
Great. So that means this meeting is adjourned at 10:52.